I started that shit off, so they didn't really know what they'd invited.
Robert Plant's refusal to appear in Game of Thrones feels, in many ways, exactly like the kind of thing Robert Plant would do. The offer itself, the chance to step into the world's biggest fantasy television series, adored by millions, with its sprawling narratives of betrayal, dragons, and dynasties, would seem tailor-made for a man whose music once defined a generation's obsession with escapism. And yet Plant's reasoning for declining the role couldn't be more him. "Well, I don't want to be typecast," he said with the sort of flippant clarity that only someone entirely comfortable in their own skin can manage.
Yeah, well, I don't want to be typecast. I started that shit off with go back to Immigrant Song, and Led Zeppelin being a part of a cultural exchange in Iceland with the Icelandic government.
To understand why Plant walked away from what most people would see as a golden opportunity, you have to delve into the way he spent his entire career carefully walking the tightrope between legend and irony. This is a man who is at once deeply in love with the mythos he helped create and yet wholly uninterested in being confined by it. It's an attitude that has defined not just his music, but his entire public persona, from his refusal to give in to repeated calls for a Led Zeppelin reunion to the nonchalant way he brushes off offers like Game of Thrones. Plant exists in a space entirely of his own making, one foot in the past and the other defiantly pointed toward the horizon. But first, let's go back to the beginning of the story, where Led Zeppelin's music and Plant's persona as a frontman first became entwined with fantasy. The connection isn't accidental, of course. Led Zeppelin emerged in the late 1960s at a time when music was transforming from simple entertainment into something more layered and immersive.
Summer days, fluid stays, sit and wait, when all will be revealed.
The idea of rock stars as mythical figures, larger-than-life personalities who could blur the lines between reality and fantasy was still relatively new, and no band leaned into that idea more than Led Zeppelin. Their music didn't just inhabit the fantasy world, it helped shape it. By the time Tolkien fans were scratching Led Zeppelin lyrics onto their school desks in the early 1970s, the band's music had become synonymous with a kind of unrestrained, otherworldly energy. At the center of it all was Plant. While Jimmy Page might have been the architect of Zeppelin's sound, layering it with blues riffs, towering guitars, and studio wizardry, it was Plant's voice, soaring, powerful, and full of raw emotion, that truly elevated it into the stratosphere.
There's a lady who's sure all that glitters is gold.
And then there were the lyrics, drenched in imagery of warriors, wizards, and journeys across uncharted lands.
And she's buying staring to heaven.
You don't write a line like, "to be a rock and not to roll," without having a sense of where the theatrical and the tongue-in-cheek overlap. Take Immigrant Song, for instance, perhaps the most explicitly fantastical track in Zeppelin's discography. Written after a trip to Iceland in 1970, it captures Plant's fascination with mythology and adventure, as well as his ability to merge it with a real-life experience. As he's recounted many times over the years, the song was inspired by the band's visit to Iceland as part of a cultural exchange. "We were guests of the Icelandic government on a cultural mission," he's said, recalling the unusual circumstances that almost derailed the concert. A strike by Icelandic civil servants meant the band's planned performance nearly didn't happen, but a university stepped in to save the day, throwing together an improvised venue for the show. "The university prepared a concert hall for us, and it was phenomenal," Plant said. "The response from the kids was remarkable, and we had a great time."
So on the way back on the plane, I started thinking about, because I love Western European history, when we were really in touch with our earth. And so the Viking thing was obviously, so that whole idea of playing in Iceland and experiencing this amazing landscape and people.
The resulting track, written during their time in Iceland, is a tribute to both the adventure of the trip and the sweeping landscapes that inspired them. In it, Plant channels the voice of a Viking warrior, singing of voyages across the sea, conquest, and discovery. "On we sweep with threshing oar," he sings, evoking the image of longboats cutting through icy waters. "Our only goal will be the western shore." But Plant, ever the self-aware performer, has been quick to point out that the song isn't meant to be taken too seriously. "We weren't being pompous," he explained. "It's not real, it's just a bit of fun." This, in many ways, is the crux of Plant's creative philosophy. A deep respect for storytelling and artistry, tempered by a refusal to fall into the trap of taking oneself too seriously. This philosophy has followed him throughout his career, and is precisely why the idea of Plant appearing in Game of Thrones feels simultaneously fitting and completely wrong. On the one hand, the show's entire ethos, its sprawling world-building, its elaborate plots, its larger-than-life characters, feels like a natural extension of the themes that run through Zeppelin's music.
Yeah.
What part did they offer you in Game of Thrones?
What was it, Nick? Do you know?
No, they hadn't decided.
Yeah. I thought I got to ride a horse and go. I hadn't got time to grow the beard, really, so no, but I mean, that's silly.
There's a clear line between immigrant song and the world of Westeros, with its icy landscapes, fierce warriors, and epic journeys. Plant's connection to Tolkien and Norse mythology only deepens that link. It's well documented that The Lord of the Rings was a major influence on many of Zeppelin's songs, from Ramble On to The Battle of Evermore.
Mordor, naughty Mordor.
It's not hard to imagine Plant fitting seamlessly into the world of Game of Thrones, perhaps as a wandering bard or a cryptic sage offering riddles about the past. But for Plant, stepping into that world would mean something else entirely. It would mean tethering himself even more tightly to the mythology that Zeppelin created, leaning into an image that he spent much of his solo career trying to move beyond. As much as Plant loves fantasy, he's never wanted to be consumed by it. "There's a lot of fun in myth," he said, "but it's also good to blow it up every now and then." His decision to allow Jack Black to use Immigrant Song in School of Rock, one of the rare occasions where Zeppelin has licensed its music for film, was motivated in part by a desire to do just that. "I think it was exactly the right thing to do with School of Rock, to blow our myth up into the sky for a while," Plant explained. "Because it's all myth. It doesn't matter." This refusal to be pinned down, to be defined by one part of his legacy, is what has kept Plant's career so vital for so long. Where many rock stars of his generation have leaned into nostalgia, content to tour endlessly on the strength of their old hits, Plant has consistently sought new ways to challenge himself artistically. His solo work, ranging from his experiments with world music to his collaborations with artists like Alison Krauss, has been defined by its diversity and willingness to take risks. Even his onstage presence has shifted over the years, evolving from the flamboyant, shirt-open frontman of the Zeppelin era to something more understated and introspective. So when Plant says he turned down Game of Thrones because he didn't want to be typecast, it's less a joke and more a succinct summary of his entire approach to his career. He's never been one to follow the obvious path, and his choices, whether it's rejecting a Zeppelin reunion, working with unexpected collaborators, or saying no to a cameo in one of the biggest TV shows of all time, are always grounded in a desire to keep moving forward. Still, it's hard not to imagine what might have been. Plant, with his wild curls and piercing eyes, stepping into the world of Westeros, would have been an unforgettable moment. Perhaps that's the point. By walking away from the role, Plant ensures that the idea of his involvement remains just that, an idea, a tantalizing possibility that will forever linger in the imagination. It's a move that feels entirely in keeping with the man himself, a performer who has always understood the power of mystery and the art of leaving an audience wanting more. And in the end, isn't that what makes Robert Plant so enduring? His ability to inhabit multiple worlds without ever fully belonging to any of them, his talent for weaving fantasy into reality while always keeping one foot grounded. Whether he's singing about Viking warriors or shrugging off the chance to play a part in Game of Thrones, Plant's genius lies in his refusal to be predictable. As he's shown time and time again, the best myths are the ones you don't try to live up to. They're the ones you create, burn down, and rebuild anew, always moving, always evolving, always just out of reach.